Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to Tapping into Non-Traditional Talent Pipelines, hosted by Mars Solutions Group. We have a great panel lined up for an engaging conversation around finding non-traditional talent for your company. We aim to also touch on the importance of incorporating diversity and inclusion into your team to improve your work culture and experience. I will be moderating today's panel. My name is Christine Dunbeck, and I am the Director of Brand Strategy and Digital Innovation at Mars Solutions Group. Thank you for joining us. Our first panelist is Kathy Heinrich. Kathy is the CEO of the MKE Tech Hub Coalition, a nonprofit focused on inclusively doubling tech talent in the Milwaukee region with over 90 members. Kathy is a long-term tech executive leading sales and partnerships for over $500 million businesses in hardware, software, and services. After receiving her master's in workforce and talent development, specifically in response to AI and automation, Kathy helped large multinational organizations transform their talent in alignment with their digital transformation. Kathy also serves on multiple nonprofit boards in the Milwaukee region. Our second panelist is Amy Therian. As a human resource professional, Amy's career spans more than 20 years in service, information technology, manufacturing, and mining industries. As the Vice President of Global Human Resources for Central Motion, Amy's responsibilities include developing and executing global HR strategy, focusing on support of organizational growth while ensuring alignment with the company's mission, vision, values, and strategic initiatives. Prior to Central Motion, Amy was the Senior Director of Human Resources, Engineered Components and Systems for Enterpac Tool Group, and Director of Human Resources Surface Mining for Komatsu Mining Corporation. Finally, our third panelist is Corey Stewart. Corey is a Senior Diversity and Inclusion Recruiter at Kohl's, a leading omnichannel retailer with more than 1,100 stores in 49 states. He has 10 years of progressive experience in talent acquisition and marries his deep passion and love for networking with guiding people to their dream careers. Before Kohl's, Corey served as talent acquisition lead at Foxconn Technology Group, where he was responsible for strategizing, developing, and implementing talent acquisition processes across their North America operations. When he is not speaking with candidates about promising careers, he enjoys domestic and international travel or watching the Milwaukee Bucks basketball games with friends and family. Following the discussion, we will engage attendees in half an hour of networking where we are happy to answer questions. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to enter them into the chat and we will answer them as we are available. Welcome to all of our panelists and attendees. Without further ado, let's get started.
Kathy Heinrich, I'm the CEO of the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition.
Amy Therian, I'm the Global Vice President for Human Resources for Central Motion.
And Corey Stewart, I am a Senior Diversity and Inclusion Recruiter at Kohl's Corporate.
Perfect. Thank you all for jumping on today. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I'm really excited for this conversation that we're going to have. So to start us off, Kathy, I was hoping you could kind of help us level set in what we're looking at in terms of non-traditional and diversity in talent in the Milwaukee area.
Sure, I'd be happy to do so. So first of all, the way we measure tech talent here in the Milwaukee region is we use a standardized report that's put out every year by CompTIA. And CompTIA measures two components. They measure both tech industry roles as well as tech occupations. And within that, for the first year this year, and partially based on prompting like organizations like ourselves, they also included diversity metrics into the CompTIA measurements. So first of all, it's important to know the Milwaukee region has approximately a little over 80,000 tech roles here in the Milwaukee region. It's about 9.5% of our economy. Unfortunately, like the rest of the country, it is not representative of the demographic of our region. So tech in general has work to do to make sure that the demographics in tech reflect the demographics of our workforce. And that's essentially what CompTIA has done in this year's measurements. So for example, nationally, the tech talent, the Black and African American population is 8% of the workforce. Here in the Milwaukee region, it's about 6%. Nationally, the Hispanic workforce and Latino workforce is about 7%. Here in Milwaukee, it's about 4%. And then nationally, females in tech is about 26%. Here in the Milwaukee region, it is actually higher than that. It's in the 28%. So what you're seeing in general is that the demographics of tech talent, we have significant work to do, whether that be here in the Milwaukee region or also at a national level.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you for citing those. That's really helpful in helping us start our discussion. Do you want to touch on what the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition is starting to do with these numbers and with this data?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. So for those that aren't familiar with the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition, it's a nonprofit that was formed a little over a year and a half ago with the mission of inclusively doubling tech talent here in the Milwaukee region. And to do so, we have partnered with many organizations here in the region, including Mars Solutions Group. We're very happy to be partnered with them. But, focused on how do we drive demand for jobs here in the region, which is inclusive of the image of the region, the startup ecosystem, and recruiting tech companies to the region, while also matching that with the appropriate supply from K through 20 reskilling and the attraction and retention of individuals to the region. In everything we do, though, we have a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we have a very specific programmatic goal that at least 50% of the individuals that we serve are from demographics traditionally underrepresented in tech, which include women, individuals of color, disabled, and veteran populations. And as we look at that, we have significantly overachieved in every program that we've done by being very intentional. So, what we're seeing is demographics of 60 to actually our most recent program at 84% of those demographics, largely because we were very intentional about how you source candidates to the program. It's intentional about how you make sure it's an inclusive environment in which everyone feels comfortable, by having partners, by having the right partnerships, by having the right leadership, by having the right mentorship in those programs, and providing holistic supports for those individuals to ensure that we have an environment where everyone can excel, regardless of the starting point from which they are coming into the program. So also making sure it's intentional on how we make it accessible to all. And so the Milwaukee Tech Hub, through our partnerships and through our members, are really working to advance both capacity of tech talent is in the region, as well as the diversity of that talent here in the region.
Perfect. Thank you. Amy, I want to go to you now, and I want to ask, what benefit have you seen from hiring non-traditional talent? And also, how do you at your company define non-traditional talent?
Sure. I mean, right now, everybody's aware we're in a really tight labor market. And so, as HR, we need to guide managers to think differently about talent. So, from our perspective, that's working with leadership on not necessarily following the same templates of job descriptions that we maybe would have in the past. So being flexible on experience, being flexible on education, being flexible on location, with the rise in work from home, traditionally we were very focused on people being in the office. Now we're more flexible on that. Of course, for your, factory type roles, that opportunity doesn't exist, but thinking differently about the talent that's out there and available, and how You can bring individuals in the organization that maybe have a bit of a skills gap. And so utilizing that opportunity to fill that gap, help give them the tools and the training, also gives you an opportunity to empower and engage your employees a little bit more in the organization. So we've done a lot of different things like looking at retirees, bringing them back into different roles, looking at your non-traditional internship of people who are maybe doing a career change and bringing them into the workforce. They bring a whole different perspective to the organization. They not only help our current employees learn more about different experiences that they bring to this position, but then they also learn the perspective of, you know, what our employees have here. So I think those non-traditional, you know, candidates really bring different viewpoints, experiences, and perspectives that if you were following the standard template, you wouldn't have found that skill and that talent.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. Kathy, what benefit have you seen from hiring non-traditional talent?
Yeah, I think first of all, Amy's points are right on target. By having more diverse talent, we actually see better business results, and that's been validated in study after study. There was just a report by McKinsey that measured the top quartile of employers and their and those that are the most diverse versus those in the lower quartile, and they showed a 36% difference in their results, in their financial results. So there's real impact that can have. But I think one of the things that wasn't mentioned that I'd like to mention is that it also makes a difference as you work to acquire talent and attract talent to your workforce. Individuals care, right, that they are coming into a workforce that supports diversity. And in fact, for tech talent, there was just a report done by DICE, and it measured for all demographic groups. Over 50% took that into consideration when making a decision whether they were going to work for an individual organization. So a commitment to diversity has to be beyond, just, it can't be, it has to be more than a slogan. It has to be real work. It has to be policies that individuals can see the commitment to diversity and a supportive, inclusive environment in which they want to see themselves.
Definitely. So Amy, back to you for a moment. I know you touched on this a little bit, but what are the main roles you look to fill with non-traditional talent?
We discuss the opportunity every time we have a position that's available. What are we specifically looking for from a unique skill and ability for this position? But I would say, traditionally, some roles are going to require that specific degree. Maybe an engineering type of role is going to need a very specific degree for that work. But when we think about some of the other roles like sales, operations, even HR, what experiences and opportunities have people had prior to working for us? And what can they bring that's different to this position, right? So another place that we've really found some great opportunity in non-traditional talent is project management. It's just a role where people who have seen different facets of the organization can bring that experience in and really help lead cross-functional, cross-global, cross-cultural teams, to drive things to completion and then help drive strategic initiatives. Especially as a project manager, if you've got strong ops, strong supply chain background, that can really help drive initiatives forward. And as we all know, the macroeconomics that are kind of affecting the organizations right now with supply chain shortages and all of those different pieces are really affecting all the businesses, right? And so from that perspective, employees have the opportunity to really make an impact on the day-to-day and the bottom line. So that perspective that they bring with them, just leads to them making better decisions, them being able to lead teams more effectively.
Definitely. Kathy, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'm really glad that Amy brought up the whole project management component. One of the things we're seeing is especially veteran populations have fantastic transferable skills, right? There's probably nobody better at the, planning of major projects than our veteran population. So I think that's a really positive. But, we actually acquired data to help us in looking at what were the near skills, right? So I think to the point that was made earlier about you might be 80% there, but you need some education, additional education to look at, to take on those roles. And so examples of that are, individuals that might have a supply chain or marketing or sales background actually have very transferable skills into areas like data analytics. And so by then taking on those additional technical skills, individuals can move up into higher paying roles and create the upward mobility that we would like to see, while also creating the diversity of the workforce when we look at past experience plus. We're seeing that specifically around the apprenticeship model that we are seeing. And in the apprenticeship model, these are mid-career individuals that may have background in supply chain or healthcare or claims processing, whatever it is. But if you can then get them the technical skills, you actually kind of get the best of both worlds, because you get both you get both knowledge, domain knowledge, plus you get technical knowledge to make them an even more productive workforce.
Gotcha, definitely. So speaking of diversity, we've been talking about that a lot. Corey, would you mind letting us know how your company prioritizes diversity?
Absolutely. So diversity and inclusion is a top priority for us here at Kohl's. And we hear about it on a daily basis, whether it's our leadership having meetings with our board, or, as a recruiter, when I talk to hiring managers and we're going out to look for talent, providing diverse slates is always a big topic of conversation. So one of the things that Kathy actually mentioned is she mentioned that word intentional when she was, kind of introducing some of her topics. And that's one thing that we're doing here at Kohl's is we're being very intentional about going out and finding diverse talent, because we want this to be more so a movement, more so than an initiative. We hate saying that this is initiative, because that's something that could be short-lived. We definitely want this to be a movement and something that we continue to grow from with this journey. I think the biggest priority for us is really the hiring practices and looking at how can we go out and find diversity? What are tools and resources that we can use to find diverse slates of candidates? And also the education piece. So another big piece is making sure that we're educating our hiring managers on this process as well, because I think one of the things you see a lot is biases throughout the recruiting and hiring process. And we all have them, no matter who you are, like you have some sort of bias, and that can play when you're going out to recruit talent, whether it's like, hey, this candidate came from the same school that I went to, so, I'm going to show more attention to this candidate, or this person grew up in, this city and, this area of the city, and I want to go out and, I like this candidate a little bit more because they grew up on that side of the city. So the education piece is also a big piece of it. And again, I've been tasked with going out and finding these tools and resources and finding these educational pieces so that we can come back and educate our team on some of the things that we're seeing in the hiring process and how we can better improve our hiring practices from a D&I recruiting standpoint.
Definitely. Kathy, was there anything that you wanted to add to that? You're muted, Kathy.
Sorry. Obviously when I talked earlier, I talked around the prioritization by, number one, having a very specific goal, right? But it goes beyond that. It means measuring that as well in everything we do, and then being transparent about how we're doing, right? By being able to showcase those metrics. It does help us from a number of different perspectives. By having and measuring very purposely, it allows us to not only, wave the banner and say, yes, we did this, but more importantly, it allows us where there are shortfalls to understand the whys behind that and then take purposeful actions that allow us to, make a difference in a different way. And so as we work to continually to be data driven, that I think is a really critical component. Is not only are we intentional from the start with a very specific goal, but then we measure religiously all the way on every metric to be able to understand the whys so that we can take the right action plans from there.
Definitely. And Corey, can we come back to you? I want to know more about what can companies do to support diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest, I think it starts with your leadership. So, you look at the top and, the leadership has to buy in, and they have to really make sure that, they're driving the business to focus on diversity and inclusion. I think some other pieces is, again, I think the education piece is huge because, diversity can be one of those sensitive topics internally that, people, it's not that they don't want to talk about it, but it's like, how do I talk about this topic? So I think educating people on, having those uncomfortable conversations, about diversity, I think is definitely key. The other big piece of it is, so I think of it in two different phases. So there's that hiring piece, from my side, but there's also the retention piece. So how do we retain the diverse employee base that we're bringing in? Because it's hard to recruit, but I feel like it's easier to recruit the talent and hire them more so than get them in the door and retain them. So really just thinking about best practices on how to retain this talent. How do we make this diverse population of an employee base feel comfortable when they walk through the door? Because I do see a lot of employees that start jobs and they just don't feel comfortable because they don't feel that inclusive piece of the onboarding, or they don't feel that inclusiveness with their teams. So really educating individuals around that, I feel can definitely help. And one thing that we like to promote is our business resource groups. So making sure that our employee base is getting involved with our resource group so that you can learn more about different cultures, or you can learn more about different areas of the business and how diversity is supported there. I think that's a huge educational piece as well. And some other things that I think of is like mentorship programs where you can really bring that talent in and get them comfortable. And I think those are definitely some key ways to make sure that the talent feels comfortable and that you can retain them. So.
Great. Amy, same question to you. What can companies do to support D&I efforts?
I mean, I think they have to look a bit outside of the box. So you have to, change a bit of what you're looking for in candidates. Focus on cultural add, not necessarily cultural fit, right? So, can you give individuals who are a cultural add different skill sets to have them grow within the organization? But then additionally, to Corey's point, looking in different places for talent is key. Affinity groups, different memberships, alumni networks, to my point is like thinking outside of the box a bit. And I think also looking at your current workforce and saying, what unique skills and abilities do I not currently have? And then how do I bring that into the workforce? And then how do I cultivate that as well as, current cultural fit? But how do you just cultivate those new ideas, thoughts and processes as well that people bring to the organization?
And Amy, is D&I a continuous process at your organization?
I think it is, because the needs of what employees and employers are going to need is going to continuously change. So, I mean, think about the dynamics that's changed over the last year. We never expected, what came up with COVID. So those needs are going to change for the organization, and then same with what employees are looking for out of employers, right? And so, I really think that creative ideas and solutions are going to be key to drive strategies forward. And especially as markets tighten, I need creative individuals to think differently on how we bring our products forward, how we can, bring solutions to our customers. And so I think, with D&I as a journey, right, that helps us bring those different perspectives in. And I think it looks different for every organization. How it's tied to your employment value proposition, how it affects your customer base, what you're connected to in the community. I think all of that looks very different for each employer. So I think it'll continue to grow and progress in all organizations.
And Corey, what about you? Do you view D&I as a continuous effort within your organization? I think you touched on this a little bit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think with us being in the retail space, we definitely want our workforce to reflect our customer base. And obviously, with diversity and D&I becoming such a big thing over the last several years, I look at it as more of a journey, just because I speak to a lot of HR professionals at other corporations, across the Midwest. And I feel like a lot of people are in the same boat, where it's like we're in the beginning phases. We're trying to figure out, what does D&I, like Amy said, look like for, our organization, or to Kathy's point, like what type of metrics do we want to put in place so that we can, measure our D&I journey. So I think a lot of companies they're in the same boat. They're figuring things out. And, I don't see this being, a thing that we say, hey, at the end of the year, like we look at this and it's like, oh, it was a success. It's going to be like, what does this look like, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road. So I do see this being a very long journey. And I think diversity and inclusion is definitely a thing to stick around for a long time. So.
Corey, I think you said that well, and that success is when our demographics of our workforce reflect the demographics of the available workforce of our society, right? And I think that's when we can all claim success, but really not until then, right?
And Kathy, not to put you on the spot here, but Milwaukee does not have a great reputation in terms of diversity, and we're often called the most segregated city in America. Has that been really difficult for you in your position to address and attempt to overcome in the tech industry?
Well, any challenge can also be considered an opportunity. And so I would look at it and say, yes, it certainly is a challenge, but I think we also can inspire people to be part of the solution, right? And one of the things that we often say about Milwaukee, and I think is very, very true, is it is small enough to make a difference. And so, whereas you can be part of a big ecosystem, whether it be Silicon Valley or wherever, it's hard to really make an impact. Here, you actually can make a difference. And I think that's what we want to inspire in everyone, is that we're small enough to make a difference. And by the way, you'll find that it's a very generous network. And so therefore, as you come in, if you have a passion, right? And this is what we kind of talk about, there are a lot of people that are really willing to help. And so, we're also rated as the most generous city. So on the positive side of the house, right? We are also rated as most generous. So I think we have to lean on that to say, how do we solve the problems and how can you be part of the solution? That we, while acknowledging our past. And I think that's all part of the journey here.
I can actually speak to this as well, because I see it on a daily basis. So, to your point, I think it can be a difficult sell for sure. When you're you're looking at other markets that might have a higher percentage of diverse talent, and you're trying to sell them on coming to a smaller market. I think it can be difficult. But one thing that I'm really excited about is that the recruiting market is opening up with remote work. And I think that you can go outside of the Milwaukee area to, get tech talent or get talent for some of our corporate jobs. And Kathy, to your point, like a lot of people don't know how cool the city is. So once you start to bring some of that talent in for meetings, or once they get to build relationships with some of their peers and coworkers that live in Milwaukee, I'm excited to see more people from the West Coast or the East Coast or South like migrate to the Midwest area to take some of the jobs and relocate to Milwaukee after they've been working, with their peers for a certain amount of time. So that's one thing that I'm excited about for the future state.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. Amy, what about you and your company?
I think first employers need to really listen and seek to understand, because I think if you don't understand the perspective of your employees, your customers, the markets you serve, the communities you live in, right? You could implement policies that maybe come off as disingenuous, or you could really disengage people. So you really want to understand first and foremost where, what your employee, your workforce is looking for. And then, for us as a global organization, we try to engage globally as well, because D&I looks differently in each country. And so how do we bring some of their viewpoints and perspectives or best practices to the organization here in the United States? And so, when we're trying to support growth and development, engagement, of not only our current workforce, but then potential workforce as well. So you're really trying to find out how all of those things can align to make it successful.
And Amy, can I ask what advice would you give for organizations that are seeking to hire more or attract more non-traditional talent and diverse talent?
I think it's two things. I think it's number one, really thinking outside of the box, really questioning your internal hiring practices, and what you've traditionally looked at from a cultural fit as opposed to a cultural add to your organization. And then secondly, like I mentioned, really understanding the perspective of your employees, because to Corey's point, then you can take that perspective out with you when looking for candidates, and it's an opportunity for engagement. So I think that all ties into thinking outside the box. It's kind of all meshed together. But I think, as organizations and as the world continues to evolve here, we're going to have to change how we not only hire employees, but how we retain them. And I think it's going to be key to challenge some, kind of historical practices and thinking that's maybe existed in different organizations in the past.
Yeah, definitely. Kathy, do you have anything that you wanted to add on this point?
Yeah, I'll just add, and Amy, I completely agree about being looking a little more flexibly on requirements. I think hiring sometimes in the past has always been based on what have I done in the past versus what is my potential. And I think when you change the mindset and start to think about hiring for passion and for commitment, and interest and potential, you actually open up a much bigger talent pool when you do so. Now, that does, though, require kind of, I think, to an earlier question, a change in mindset as well. So it takes a change in mindset to make sure that there's a culture of mentorship in an organization, so that an individual isn't expected to come in and perform immediately, but rather has us surrounded by those that can help them be successful, versus just kind of, I think in the past, and I saw this in a lot of global organizations, it's that sink or swim mentality. And I think what you're starting to see is a mentality of surround for success and to lift up. And I think when we have that culture of mentorship, we can start to build for success, versus only looking at what somebody has historically done to knowing whether they can be successful.
Definitely. Corey, yeah, did you have something to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go back to that word intentional. So really being intentional about what you're doing, looking at, how are you showing up to events? Who are you partnering with as far as diversity organizations, things of that nature, because I know that a lot of the candidates that are in that population, they want to feel like this is authentic and that the company is really behind diversity and that it's not just an initiative or a flavor of the day type of thing. And I think another piece of it is that we look at diversity and how do we hire talent so much at like the IC or individual contributor level that we need to, focus more in on the leadership, the management and leadership types of roles, those C-suite types of positions, and we need to be more intentional about putting diversity there as well. Whether it's women or people of color. I think that's a big statement when I'm a candidate and I'm looking at a potential company and I go to their website and I look at their board or I look at their executive leadership and I see people that I can resonate with. I'm like, okay, like that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable, or this company is really behind diversity. So I think those are some great things that an organization can kind of look at and say, hey, maybe we do need some diversity in these areas, or what groups are we partnering with? How can we show up a little bit better, and how can we be more intentional? So those are things to look at.
And Corey, staying with you, what do you think is the most challenging aspect of working in a diverse environment?
To be honest, I think it's like getting everyone to buy into diversity in D&I, because I think a lot of people, they say they want diversity or they say they want that, but do they truly want it? And then when you do get diversity talent through the door, how are you making those individuals feel? So I think, people have to be open to it. They have to respect, different perspectives and things of that nature, because a lot of what I see is, we want diversity, but is it the diversity of thought we're looking for? Or again, going back to that point where it's like, hey, this person's diverse, but they're just like me. And to be honest, to me, that's not true diversity. So really just opening up your mind to diversity of thought and, just accepting different opinions.
I agree. I was going to say that, people need to get past that diversity is just about gender or race, right? It's more than that. It's where you come from, what you've experienced, what you bring to the table. And I think really one of the big keys is education, that all organizations should focus on, that it's less about categories, because I think it's moved into this spot where people want to categorize diversity, and that's not what's going to get us to the success level. Instead, we need to focus on bringing everybody to the table so everybody's ideas are heard, to Corey's point.
Yeah, and I would add, as you think about challenges, I think we have to make sure that we're thinking about talent as a long-term proposition, right? As opposed to a short-term acquisition. And it really is a long-term relationship in which we invest in talent for skills for the future. And when we invest, we build diversity by looking at adjacent skill sets, et cetera. But that has to be an intentional investment to allow us to continue to build talent in addition to just acquiring talent. And speaking specifically around tech talent, we know that there is not enough nationally. There's not enough internationally, right? There just is not enough tech talent. And so we have to be thinking about how do we take the talent today that we have here in the geography, in existing employers, et cetera, and continue to build the skill sets that we're all going to need for the future. And when we have that long-term relationship with talent versus a transactional view, that's when I think we will truly get to building the diversity that we want to see in our workforce.
Yeah, I think something that you all touched on a little bit is just how important it is to have internal buy-in for these types of initiatives. And Corey, something that you mentioned was people aren't even sure they aren't sure how to start having those conversations, and they're afraid of saying the wrong thing, and they're afraid of, just being perceived incorrectly. Do you have any advice for people who are feeling that way, or what organizations can do to help?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those things that I learned when I was younger. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. So sometimes you just have to have the courage to go in and have that conversation. And if there's something that you're curious about, just ask the question. I feel like a lot of times, that just helps, because some people are like, hey, I don't know if I should ask this question or if I should ask this. And it's like, just ask the question. I'll be honest, I had a conversation with one of my friends, and she just took on a role at Alverno as a director of diversity and inclusion there. And we were having this conversation about diversity, and I kept saying African American. And then she said, why don't you just say Black? And I was like, I never thought about that. So it's just like, you just have to ask the question, and just have the courage to do it. I think that's the biggest thing. So.
Amy, what about you? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think people also have to give each other space to be able to, for someone to feel comfortable to ask questions, right? You need to open yourself up a bit and make a welcoming space for somebody to ask questions that might be uncomfortable. And so I think, organizations that set up affinity groups, those are the individuals who are, raising their hand saying, I'm open to conversation. To Corey's point, I'm open for you to come ask me a question. And I think it's education as well. Doing global diversity training for us was very interesting, because it's not the same, it's not categorized in other countries as gender and race. It's very different. So spending time and understanding different people's perspectives, and especially on a global level, I think really changes how you perceive diversity, or how you perceive how a business manages diversity. And then additionally, I just think it gives you a different perspective to start asking the questions, because then you can say, well, I didn't grow up in this culture, so help me understand. And I think when people understand it comes from a place of genuinely wanting to grow and learn, then they're very accepting of that.
Amy, when you were thinking, it said give space. I actually was thinking give grace as well, right? Because I think it's such an important topic of being able to genuinely feel like most people want to be, they want to learn and continue to grow, but we'll make errors along the way. But then it takes, on the flip side, it takes courage to, whether you want to call it throw the flag or whatever, right? And I don't know if I've told this story once, but as a female in tech, I was in one of our diversity meetings, and my manager at the time could only think of women as an example of diversity. And I have to admit, I said to him afterwards, I said, I never thought of myself as a minority until this meeting. And, I think helping people who he was genuinely he definitely wanted to do the right thing, but having the courage to help him think about other forms of diversity, et cetera, and help each other grow, I think is an important thing, but it takes both sides of that equation.
Yeah, Corey, do you have any additional thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think what everyone said is great. One thing just came to my mind. And I know for us, one of the key things is just partnering with different organizations, whether they be local or national. And one of the things that we've been doing is getting our executives involved. So if they're, like, for instance, there's a golf outing this week, Friday, and it's a diverse group that's putting on this golf outing. And we've invited a few of our executives and managers to go to this event and just mingle with people and learn about the culture and learn about the organization, and things of that nature. And we've also had other executives, do webinars at national events, national conferences with some of the partners that we have, just so that they can learn more about these organizations and they can be more involved, so that they can buy into it, and then we get that buy-in from them. That's just going to trickle down to our managers and our associates. And I think that's another good way, is just to get those leaders involved and get them educated on some of these different organizations, some of these different cultures, so that they can sell it to their teams as well.
I think for leaders, it's very important to get perspective on things that you didn't grow up with, or you might not understand different challenges that individuals have. And I myself am on a board of a school, Malika Early Learning, which is in Milwaukee and serves underprivileged children. And it's given me a very different perspective of how people who maybe are in that neighborhood might not have the same opportunities as others. And so how do we change those opportunities through growth and education for those children? And I've brought those, lessons that I've learned to the, business environment of how I maybe think of somebody who is in my India office or in my, a different location, and maybe they haven't experienced the same things I have. And so, maybe I need to be more clear or specific, or maybe I need to give more background or listen to them more and help, understand what they're feeling or what they're going through, so that I can help relate to that more.
Amy, for someone who is just learning to have conversations like that, they're learning to make that safe space, and to Kathy's point, to give grace. Do you have any advice on how someone could start that, or how organizations could start those conversations?
I think it's key for employees to, when talking to other individuals in the organization, to set up the framework for the discussion. I'm interested in learning this because of this. So explaining their reasoning instead of just walking up and saying something that could then be perceived as rude or insensitive, right? So, and then asking, are you comfortable having this conversation with me? Making sure the two-way communication has been established and it's okay. And then it's a great opportunity to set up framework around the discussion, right? Say to the other person, if you get comfortable in what I'm asking, please tell me. So giving people that freedom and that allowance to say, okay, stop, now you've gone into a different area, or we need to redirect, or whatever that is. But I think really employees need to start, as you would with anyone, when you want to learn about something, you have to set up kind of the framework and the ground rules on how to have those conversations.
Definitely. Corey, anything that you want to add to that?
No, I think that's great. Like you said, just really putting that structure to, how to have the conversations, getting people more comfortable with having those conversations. And then, once you get to that point, I think, things just kind of come up organically, and, they're authentic. So I think that's a great point.
Definitely. And Kathy, you work with a ton of different organizations in the Milwaukee area. And so you're talking to leadership of a lot of organizations in the Milwaukee area. And have these issues been top of mind for the leaders that you've been talking to?
Absolutely. It is a board level discussion every single board meeting, but it's also, the coalition has a governance structure of committees for each of our priority areas. It comes up in every dialogue. And I think that's so critical to keep top of mind our goal and objective to increase the diversity of the tech talent in the workforce requires that it be part of every conversation. And so I'm seeing it, I think Corey said earlier, not just a moment, but a movement. I think it's a very positive movement for us to be integrating these conversations. And and really literally integrating it into everything we do versus having it as a standalone initiative, I think is so critical to making it be pervasive in our approach.
Definitely. Yeah, Amy.
I just think when it, to Kathy's point, when it becomes cultural, right, and it doesn't feel like it's something that's being enforced or put onto people to do, right, that's when you've really moved forward on the journey. And so, from our perspective as an organization, we started off with, diversity training to help people understand, what is it when we even say that word? What does it mean? And then how do you learn about diverse cultures, diverse backgrounds, and how do you have some of those conversations? So, to your point, then starting to implement things small, like now in our succession planning, we track, male to female ratio within the organization. In some of our other demographics, we track. We go through and do our annual comp evaluation and really make sure that we don't have any disparate treatments happening within our workforce, right? So really starting up some of those things small, where it feels then just part of your culture. It's just what you do.
Yeah, Amy, that's great. And that kind of answers I was trying to think about. I think DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and D&I, diversity and inclusion, become buzzwords. And we keep saying that we need this internal buy-in. We need people, to work on this together internally in our organizations' cultures. But it almost becomes a buzzword that people say and they don't necessarily move to. They just say it, to have it out there. And so I was going to ask, what are some of the things that you're doing to help make it more than just a buzzword? And you mentioned some great things that you're doing. And I think in terms of making sure it's important, Kathy, you mentioned some statistics too, that we talk about how much better off your company's going to be if they really prioritize things like this and really lean into them. So Amy, I don't know if you had any other thoughts.
I mean, like I said, start small, but I think you have to ask the question, right? Anytime, we just acquired an organization, and so therefore we're reviewing policies and systems and processes. And that's when you have to start asking the questions of, how do we embed DEI into this without it, to Corey's point being an initiative? Because as soon as it becomes an initiative, it feels like a forced viewpoint. And instead, we're not looking to do that. We're looking to make it cultural and just make it part of our company DNA. But in order to do that, I kind of want to do it where you don't even feel like I'm doing it, right? You don't feel like there's this, huge, marketing rollout of it, right? We just want to make it about who we are and what we do. And as a global organization, we've got to move forward with that in all of the countries that we're in, right? Because it's diversity, inclusion, it's all of those pieces. And it should be, if we're going to ask our employees to work cross-globally, cross-culturally, that starts at home too. So we've got to embed those things everywhere in order for everybody to really reach out and work with each other in the right ways.
Kathy, do you have any additional thoughts on that?
I think Amy's right? I mean, it should be pervasive across the board. And I think to the point, corporations actually have an ability to create cultural change. And I think more and more corporations are embracing that, to be a positive force for good in society. And this is one of those areas that the cultural shift can occur at the workplace and have great downstream effects across all of our society. So it really, and then the last thing, I think your question started with the impact. And I think diversity of all types, whether we're trying to reflect how people will use a product, how they will buy a product, how they will perceive a marketing campaign. It does not matter, but having a diverse voice at the table across that board is so important to making sure that you're doing everything possible, not only from a social good perspective, but it also leads to, it's good for business too. And so I think having both of those is so important.
Definitely. Corey, did you have anything else that you wanted to add to this point?
No, I think I'm good on my end. I think Kathy and Amy definitely provided some really good answers. So
definitely. And Kathy, something we say internally is, good for business and also business for good.
Thank you so much to our panelists for such a great discussion. Thank you for attending. Now we're going to go into breakout rooms for some additional networking. So feel free to take a minute or two to run to the restroom, grab something to drink, and then we will work on putting everyone into breakout rooms and getting ready for networking. Stay tuned.